Well, hey, everybody. My name's Jake Milstein at Critical Insight. And we have a special live presentation today because of some big changes to a regulation called GLBA. And with me today is Fred Langston, who is one of the company co founders and is an expert on all sorts of new regulations. He advises companies near and far. And he's our chief product officer. Fred, can you tell us a little bit what is GLBA and what are the changes here?
Sure. So GLBA stands for Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. The act it's almost coming up on 18 years ago that it was put into place. And it was put into place to regulate the data of people who you're giving credit to. So it could be anything from a student loan organization that gives credit to student loan people. They are under GLBA. If you're involved in credit collections, that entire space is regulated under GLBA. So if you are out there, doing medical debt collection, which ironically puts you both in GLBA as well as HIPAA, right? So those folks actually have a double whammy, right? Because they're actually dealing with two different kinds of regulated data. But GLBA is really about financial data, and the data they seek to protect, and everybody has their own acronym, is called NPI, non-public personal information. Seems like it'd be two P's, but non-public's one word. So NPI data is what is protected, but it's the same types of things we would expect. My account number, my name and address as it relates to my account number, how much money I've been provided in terms of credit, any of those sorts of things are covered. The collections actions that are being taken against me, any of that stuff is covered under this. So if you're in a space that carries covered data under GLBA, actually you've always needed to be in compliance with the regulation, and the overall grand framing of the regulation has not changed. Well, what they've done is they've looked and said, people aren't paying attention and doing their compliance work that they should be. And in fact, because it's an older information security regulation, we weren't very prescriptive back then. In other words, we kind of left it really wide open. You should have a security program. What does that mean,
Well, I
right?
mean, a lot's changed in 18 years.
Exactly. The whole world's matured. Everybody now understands cybersecurity. Back then, 1 in 10 people understood what cybersecurity was. So now we're in the modern world. Everybody's a target, in particular, people that have this kind of data. You're absolutely a target for the bad guys. And the government wants to tighten up the ship, right? They want to make sure that yet another American industry has not become easy targets for the bad guys, right? Because
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing some breaches now for healthcare debt collection for a large healthcare debt collection company. So yeah, and our research shows that the bad guys are going after third parties that hold more data more and more and more. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not sometimes just financial records. It may have other value. Medical records, now you're getting a 2-for-1 deal. So the big target, as you mentioned, there was one of the largest healthcare breaches of the year was actually of a medical debt collection company, PFC. And so it was one of the largest NPI data breaches of the year and then one of the largest healthcare data breaches of the year. So that's why you're a target, right? Pretty clear that if you hold that kind of data that the bad guys want, they're going to be coming after you.
So what are the changes? What are the old regulations? What are the new ones,
Yeah.
Fred?
So they've always had, like I said, the same basic framework. You should have a security program. You should have security controls on your network. You should protect data. But they've actually gotten a lot more deep in the guidance and what they're saying. And they're actually going to be auditing people coming up here in December, here in 2 months, 3 months now. We're almost into end of year. They're going to start auditing people, and this has become the law, and there's going to be penalties. So the things that they're really looking for, at the very least, you have to have a qualified individual that's responsible for your program, your information security program. This person needs to have the responsibility. It's going to be assigned to them. They will be responsible for that. They're a senior member of your team, and there's somebody that's going to be taking on managing this program, or at least being responsible for the information security program you need to have in place.
And does
So
that need any new person? Can that be an IT director, CIO? Who does that need to be?
yeah, so it's one of these in quotations qualified individual. Your It's up to you to determine who a qualified individual is. But I think if you were to put somebody who was, let's say, a finance director in charge of this, that might not be somebody you would think of as a qualified individual in terms of protecting the data. Yes, they may care about the data because of their job, but they're not qualified to protect the data.
Sure.
So you're probably looking at a compliance officer, maybe your IT director, maybe you have an information security officer at your organization, but ultimately that's what you're going to be defining. Somebody
Sure.
is going to become that role.
And can it be outsourced as a VCSO?
It can be, but ultimately it's the regulatory burden is going to rely or land on somebody within your organization.
Got it.
So you would have to proxy that responsibility through somebody at your organization, because they can't, government can't go out and get a contract employee. They go after the company that actually has the violation itself.
Makes sense. Okay, so what else is in the new
Yeah.
safeguard rule here?
Yep. So overarching all this, there's always been the requirement to do a risk assessment. Okay. I've been doing GLBA risk assessments over 18 years myself. What they're saying now is this needs to be a very formal. It needs to be documented. You need to take the results of this risk assessment and build a plan that you're going to implement over the year. You need to revisit this risk assessment on an annual basis, and you need to present this data to the board and to the executives. So they're really saying you need to have a true information security program at this point. All the components that you need: measuring risk, figuring out where your gaps are, what vulnerabilities exist, what impacts may occur if something bad happens. Because when you're talking risk assessment, that's one step beyond just figuring out where the holes are. You have to say, here are the holes. And if somebody were to take advantage of one of these vulnerabilities, what bad things could happen? So it's even one step farther than saying, here's where I do not have a control in place. For example, I don't have information security policies in place. That would be the control. But what risk assessment says is, I also need to figure out, what does this mean if something bad happens? So you need this formal risk assessment to underlie everything. It should build your roadmap for all the other elements that are going to come under this, right? So the things that now they're also leaning into is making sure that data is encrypted in transit over external networks, or at rest. Right, or at rest, right? So you need to understand where this data is. You need to make sure it's being encrypted, because it's sensitive data. If a bad guy gets in and the data is encrypted, and you have, effectively not also compromised your encryption keys by handing it to them or something like that, it means that they can't actually see the data. And while they may have gone into the system, you may have lost availability. The data itself has not been compromised because it's encrypted.
Mm-hmm.
They also are leaning heavily into multi-factor authentication. So most of us are getting familiar. You've got a phone now. When I log in, maybe it sends an SMS code. I type in a code. Maybe it says approve this login on my phone. You click the button. But multi-factor authentication is a key component of any security program. If there's anything in this regulation, I would say should be adopted by everyone, everywhere, all the time, it's multi-factor authentication. Keep in mind, when they say this, just having multi-factor for your email may not meet the standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's any place you're connecting to data of your NPI, your customer data, that should have multi-factor authentication. So it's not just email, right? Could be internal applications, could be VPNing into the internal network, could be a network share that's open to everybody. But everybody should not be able to see this data, right? You need to have access control, and adding multi-factor authentication increases the level of security around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You need to think about, if you're developing your own applications, you need to have a documented secure development practice and processes. In other words, if you're going to build something, you need to be building it in a secure fashion, and you need to document how you're actually going to do that.
Sure.
A lot of people in this space build applications. A lot of them don't even think about this. And especially if you're outsourcing that component to a third party, which happens all the time, you need to make sure that they are, in fact, using secure practices when they're building your applications. There's other things they're leaning into, like disposal of customer data.
Mm-hmm.
Just putting a hard drive when you're done with it in a trash can means you're probably just shipping the data out your door to anybody that can pick up that hard drive and plug it in. So you need to understand how to effectively delete using secure deletion methods of data, shred paper data that may have that sort of information on it, and make sure your data retention policies are minimizing the length of time that you're retaining it. You don't want to have to spend money protecting this data for a lot longer than you're required to keep it. So have a policy that gets rid of it when it comes time for that data to no longer
and
use.
and Fred, is having an incident response plan part of that as well?
Absolutely. So they're leaning into all the concepts of an incident response plan and the policies and procedures that manage everything that happens in your organization. So, got to have policies, got to have procedures, got to have an incident response plan, and all these things are documentation of what you're doing and how you're doing this. They also talk about testing. So there's a number of layers of testing. If we're talking about an incident response plan, testing of that is a tabletop exercise, which is something everyone should be doing anyways. It's always say you don't want to be reading the instructions to the fire extinguisher while the house is burning, right? And if you haven't done an exercise to know what's in your plan, how to do the things in the plan, you're going to be standing there watching your house burn, right? So the other kind of testing is leaning into the types of testing that happen at the network layer. So that
Mm.
means things like vulnerability assessments, which you should probably be doing quarterly. So that's actually, well, at least every 6 months minimum, probably quarterly, better. The regulation is 6 months. But that means scanning your network and looking for missing patches, misconfigurations. There are tools out there, some are free. One is OpenVAS, is a free tool. Its counterpart, Nessus, is an industry standard for vulnerability assessment. We'd recommend you use a tool like that to do your assessments. And then you need to do annual penetration tests. Penetration tests are, you start with a vulnerability assessment, you look where the holes are, and then a human, somebody who's trained like a hacker, comes in and attempts to break into those systems and prove whether your controls that you have in place are actually working or not. These are all hard requirements now. Before, these were like, yeah, you should be doing this. Now they're going to come out and audit people around this. You have to be doing these things at this point in time.
Yep. And system monitoring, is that I've seen one thing that says you got to monitor your system as part of this. Is that also part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's anytime you are trying to manage your security program, if you're not monitoring what is going on. So, for example, the internal processes for responding to some kind of information that may be indicative of a security event, you need to be able to monitor your systems, understand what's happening, and then if something is suspicious, you kick off your incident response plan. So this is all tied into this continuum of what does it mean to have an effective security controls and program and incident response plan, which are all required. Well, you need to be able to have visibility into those systems, those controls, and those processes to make sure things are actually not showing signs of malicious activity, and in fact, things are working as you'd expect. So again, they're really starting to think holistically about this set of regulations and what they mean, and trying to get people to think of this as, it's not a couple things to check off a list. They're asking for a full information security program to be in place at this point in time.
And Fred, as we say with most frameworks, most cybersecurity frameworks, as we say with most rules, we, Critical Insight, can help you with all of it and take some of it off your hands and do it for you.
Absolutely. So we can do everything from helping you understand where you're at. What is your posture in relation to the regulation? If we're going to do that, we would probably extend it and do the full risk assessment. So the gap analysis component, here's where you're missing parts of your program that should be there. And the risk part is, and here's the bad things that can happen because those things aren't in place. We can help you do that. The most important thing that comes out of that is the roadmap. So what I would tell anyone listening here is when you're building out your roadmap, because that's part of your risk assessment, it's the output of your risk assessment, is here are the things that we're going to do over the next year, 2 years to remediate these problems, is you need to understand your capabilities. And if we're helping you do this, we're going to spend as much time understanding your organization, your management support for this, your budget, the number of people you have to bring to bear on security. What do you have in sunk costs in your already installed security controls? Putting all this together then allows you to build a plan that's achievable. Remember, these things, even with these relatively very strict guidance on, yes, you need to have an annual penetration test. How you go about it doing that, what's appropriate for you, who you may hire, how you may go about that is entirely should be based on your organization and what you're capable of doing. Maybe you can do it internally. You're a big organization. Maybe you've got an information security team of 10. No problem probably to do your own internal pen test. If you have no information security team and you've got 3 IT folks, you should be looking outside for help, right? Another thing, we do that as well. We do any of the testing, any of the vulnerability assessments, writing policies, the plans, the tabletops, pretty much everything, Jake, that's in here. This is the reason we exist. We've been delivering these kinds of services for as long as we've been.
So we can help you with the IR plan. We can help you with the risk assessment. We can help you with the vulnerability identification. We can help, quarterly, as you said, or every 6 months. We can help you with the 24/7 threat detection investigation. And we can, then we can test it all with penetration tests and tabletop exercises. So you can go to criticalinsight.com to find out more about us. Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks have questions, feel free to email me, jake@criticalinsight.com, or go to our website and submit a question hitting the contact us button. All right, everybody. Fred, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us. Have a terrific day.